The reason white South Africans are applying for refugee status under the Trump administration in the U.S. has to do with the same reasons why many South Africans, including white South Africans, have been immigrating over the past 30 years. It has to do with high levels of unemployment and high levels of crime. And these people feel that they have great opportunity to be safe and to flourish in countries outside of South Africa.
A refugee is someone who has to leave their country of origin out of fear of political persecution, religious persecution, or economic persecution. Does any of these people fit any of the status?
Most South Africans, the government, civil society believe that these so-called refugees do not comply with the definitions of refugees. There is no political prosecution of white minorities or any minorities, and including farmers.
In January this year, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa signed a law allowing the government to seize privately owned land without compensation, that is, when it is deemed in the interest of the public. Has the government started seizing any land from anybody yet?
No, that law is in line with many international laws around the ability to confiscate specifically land that lies idle or has been abandoned. So although, some of the political parties are fearful that it could be used to confiscate commercial farming land or other land, it has not been used. There's no cases of any commercial farming land that have been confiscated using this act. We have heard of incidents where it might be used to expropriate patches of land that, for example, electricity over, the electricity grid runs through to make it easier for them to maintain it and things like that, but not to expropriate commercial farming interests at all.
I remember Trump's closest advisor, South African-born Elon Musk, has alluded to a genocide of white people in South Africa. Have you observed any genocide taking place in the country?
There is no white genocide that has taken place in South Africa. As a matter of fact, the least likely or least at-risk people in the country to be killed and murdered are white South Africans, followed by Indian South Africans. And this type of narrative was formed just after the democracy by right-wing South Africans to illustrate how white South Africans are being murdered, as crime rates seem to have gone up during that period. But we know that most murders happen in marginalized areas in South Africa, mostly populated by Black South Africans, and in areas where there are huge gang activity. So we know, for example, that 50% of murders happen in only about 30% of the police precinct areas in the country, 20% in only about 30 police stations out of 1,170 police stations. So we can pinpoint exactly where most murders are concentrated, and they are not in so-called white traditional areas at all. Of course, South Africa does have a violent crime problem, and we're not denying it. And we have a particular violent robbery problem that affects many South Africans across the board. And of course, in some of these cases, people die. So it is not that crimes don't get perpetrated and white people do not get murdered. But you are more likely to be murdered if you're a South African living in poorer areas and more marginalized areas. So there's definitely no white genocide, and that is one thing that 99% of South Africans will agree upon.
President Trump's openness to accept Afrikaner refugees comes at a time when the U.S. has engaged in wider crackdown on migrants and asylum seekers from other countries. Why are white Afrikaners receiving preferential treatment in the United States of America then?
That is a question that has puzzled all of us, including the American society. This is a question for the Trump administration, why these people get preferential treatment ahead of so many deserving refugees across the world, coming from armed conflicts, especially those in areas such as Afghanistan and the Middle East, and Sudan and Central Africa, where we know also in many of these America played a role, and some of these people that are not getting these asylum has been called or refugee status, has actually been assisting America for years in the different wars in these places. So we're as puzzled as anybody why these people get preferential treatment.